So I'll invite now Adrian Dinculescu, Managing Partner Namirial, to join me on the stage. And I promise that we will talk more about the EU identity, I guess. So digital identity, it's, I don't know whose that phone is, but let's start with the microphone, and she or he will get the phone after the session. So Adrian, thanks for joining us, and we approached the subject of the digital identity before, but now I wanted to understand more about this and how do you think it will be implemented in Romania? Is it like a single point of contact between EU, DI, and I don't know, local authorities? How do you see this?
Very interesting question, for which, unfortunately, I don't know the answer. The idea is that we're talking in the context of EIDAS, and EIDAS came up with, there was a first version that dealt with e-signatures, amongst others, electronic identification, electronic delivery, registered services, and so on. And then there is EIDAS 2.0, which focuses mostly on identities. It brings several other trust services into play, like electronic archiving, but most of the things are concentrated around electronic identity. And then it brought into discussion this European Union digital identity wallet. How this will shape to be and what the final version of the legislation will be, nobody knows. Right now there are inputs that are being received from the countries that have the presidency of the EU, and each of them comes with new proposals, new amendments, or tries to fix things that are being brought up by the member states. What the legislation around the digital wallet revolves around right now is level of assurance. Some countries want a high level of assurance, how secure you are about the identity of the person. Then there was a discussion about a European Union wide digital identification number, something like the CNP from Romania, the personal identification number, but it would be EU-wide. And then there are strong opposers to this because of how much it gets into your personal details. Then you have to deal with the digital wallet being used as an identification, and then there are also opponents to this part of the European Union digital identity wallet, because some people claim that you should be able to anonymously access some services and not necessarily with a wallet, and that the countries should be free to choose the identity that they want. So if they want to use an European wallet, they could do so, and so on. So it's very uncertain how it will shape up. There are constant revisions, and there is one that is expected actually today or maybe tomorrow from the Czech from Czech Republic, because they have the presidency of the EU right now. You asked about...
But from the perspective of EIDAS 2.0, do you think that we are ready for all these changes?
No, I mean,
as a country?
Romania made an important step with the norms for remote identification. I guess everybody in this room is aware about ADR's changes and what came into effect last November. So a year ago, when the ADR came up with some norms that should regulate how the remote identification of a person is done. And here we talk about different types of identifications, assisted, self-onboarding, and so on. Now, the decision was taken probably into a different context. There was the platform that was supposed to bring all the identities of the people together. And then these norms were supposed to give the means of bringing those identities into that platform, PSCID. good, bad, hard to tell. At least there is a national law right now that tells you how to do the identification. There are vendors which are prepared to offer such solutions, and now the financial institutions have to, mostly financial institutions, but also public entities, payment service providers, and so on, have to find a way to comply with the ADR rules. If this will be able to be used in the context of the EU wallet, I don't think so.
Okay.
So I think they're decoupled, but anyways, personally I see the EU wallet, digital identity wallet, coming into effect not sooner than 3 years from now.
Okay, so we will have a local legislation.
So we have a lot of time,
valuable for like 2-3 years, and after that we have to change it. So
yes,
yeah, Romanian story. Okay, so I also wanted to ask you, because you've seen a lot of digital transformations and you had a lot of banks as clients with Namirial. What are the main changes you've seen in the last, I don't know, year in Romania, and after that maybe on a EU level?
Well, we as a company focused on electronic signatures initially. When we launched our services in Romania, we focused only on electronic signatures in all its forms: simple, advanced, qualified. Now the truth is that in Romania, almost everyone is mostly interested in qualified signatures. They're very rare the cases where simple or advanced signatures are being used. There are indeed cases, and for instance, the change in the work legislation, which allows for advanced electronic signatures, was a big step forward to push for other types of signatures, except for qualified ones. Now, we have now the norms of ADR, so electronic identification, remote identification is also an interesting step, but it was already implemented. It was just not regulated. Now it's also regulated. So we have on one side the onboarding, then we have the electronic signature, then which is complemented or going hand in hand with trust services. We have electronic archiving, which is getting more and more interest from the market, because it was not clear until now what kind of documents you had to store in an electronic archiving solution. Now you know for sure that, for example, work-related contracts have to be stored there, identification artifacts have to be stored there, so electronic identification is definitely becoming very important. We have certified communication. We see a lot of traction for certified communication because companies need to replace the way they're sending paper documents to their customers. And then we see other means of signing transactions, not necessarily in the format of a document, of a PDF or Word, but for example on a website for accepting different types of terms and conditions.
I'm very curious, after this legislation, ADR legislation, how do you see the interaction between clients and public authorities?
There was an attempt from ANAF to allow people to register in the private space on ANAF using a remote identification. It was done via assisted video onboarding, and then the whole initiative died because of these new norms. And I don't think it was revived until now. I didn't see yet a lot of public authorities adopting remote identification mechanisms. There is something in ghișeul.ro which resembles some sort of a remote identification. I don't think in any ways it fulfills the requirements of ADR. But besides this, there is not much. All that has been done with regards to identification has been done mostly in the private sector. Financial services sector being the primarily user of remote onboarding solutions, followed by other companies, for example, insurance companies or companies from other verticals in the context of different use cases.
But after digital identity being implemented, I don't know, 3 years from now, ANAF will be forced to comply to that legislation and accept like the digital identity in different kind of flows and transactions?
Well, the situation right now is that in order to do remote identification, you have to use a solution that is compliant with ADR's norms. So this means that you either have identity service provider, which is showing up in the list of ADR, and there are only 3 companies that are in this list right now, or you have to be a provider from outside of Romania, which has already an EIDAS approved means of identification. These are the 2 ways. The options right now are quite limited. So maybe this is the reason why the public entities did not get on board with doing remote identification. But I believe, and I strongly would want to believe that in the near future, public entities will allow citizens to access services remotely by doing remote identification, because otherwise you don't get anywhere. You don't get to offering remote services as a public authority. So I hope that as the list grows on ADR side of international service identification providers grows, then the public entities will also have more choices and will want to implement such solutions.
Okay, got it. Thanks. And the final question for you, and after that we'll take one from the audience. I know that at the start of the pandemic we had a chat and you told me that demand for digital signatures skyrocketed. So does that trend is also present now? You see similar growth rates, especially on I don't know, SME market?
Fortunately for us, yes. So it's still a good business to be in, this one with electronic signatures, with electronic identification. So volumes are still steady. There is a certain level of increase year over year, not as aggressive as it was during the pandemic when everybody was forced to use remote services, but there is still an increase. So yeah, the adoption rate is
good business.
Quite good. It's quite good business. Yes.
Okay. I got it. Thanks. One question from the audience, if it's yeah, we have one question there. Thanks, Denisa. The farthest point from there.
Okay, so I feel very strongly about electronic signature. We have legislation since 2001 regarding its law 455 of 2001 regarding electronic signature. It works fine for those who use it, like me. And you mentioned that the state authorities practically don't use it. And they seemingly refuse to use it. To me, it's just so difficult to understand. Now, the question is, in this new legislation, are there any plans of introducing compulsory, European-wide, compulsory use of electronic signature if the petitioner requests it? Because that way, you know, coming down from Europe, finally might get our institutions to use it. And I'm sure they have it. It is so easy to use. You know, it's just a token, you plug it in your laptop, you set up your Outlook or whatever you're using, and that's it. But then you can use it forever without even thinking about it.
We got it.
Do you know what is interesting? Let me just add this. We have a new article in the Romanian Civil Procedural Code, 154*1, which says that by default, if the petitioner requests it, the tribunal or the courthouse is obligated to send the court decisions via email, by default. So it's a progressive move, 1541 of CPC. So going back to the question, are there any plans to make it compulsory if the citizen requests it?
If the citizen requests it, is no longer compulsory.
No. If I send with email an email with electronic signature saying, well, I want you to send me all the documents from, let's say, a courthouse. Let's just take an example. With electronic signature, you can, I mean, there is legislation that allows that, but they still don't do it. Do you see what I mean? It's really weird. So this is why I was asking if there are plans at European level to make it compulsory if the citizen requests it. If there are, there are.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Adrian is not representing necessarily an authority.
I have no idea if the EU would be able to impose something like that. They can only create the context for electronic signatures to be used. You mentioned the law 455. This is very old, 2001. It's no longer even mentioned in the courts. Everybody refers to EIDAS. With regards to electronic signatures, there is emergency ordinance number 38, which forces the public entities to accept documents signed in electronic format. EIDAS says that a document signed in electronic format cannot be refused legal value regardless of the type of signature. So there are a lot of elements which would help a judge settle a dispute in case somebody wants to make use of electronic transactions. There are different such cases in the court. Even there was a decision of the High Court in Romania for a case where somebody said that a loan contract should not be considered as legally closed because there was an electronic signature requested for that document and so on. So there is the legal context, there is the willingness to use signatures. Now, I don't think somebody should force you to use it. As long as it offers you the option to both sign on paper and electronically, I think this is more than enough. Token certificates, I'm strongly opposing them. You mentioned them as well. I think remote certificates are much better and much simpler to be used because you can use them from anywhere.
Got it. We have to wrap this up because we almost in the networking session. So thank you, Adrian, for joining us.